Today on Upfront, what to do about ongoing problems at Wisconsin's flagship economic development agency, the WEDC. Next, a call for the agency's CEO to step down. Senator Julie Lasa on why new leadership is needed. Plus, two former state commerce secretaries on why the WEDC has had so much trouble and what could turn it around.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with Mike Boucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Upfront. We've been focusing the last few weeks on this program on the battle over the state budget, but today we're looking at another big story that's been somewhat overshadowed by the back and forth over education, roads, and arena, and the prevailing wage. We're talking about the future of Wisconsin's premier economic development agency and what can or should be done with it. The Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation was designed to be the state's big job creation catalyst. And in the 4 years since its creation, it's had some successes. But it's also had more than its share of negative headlines. Most recently, that it gave away dozens of awards without proper internal review. Perhaps most damaging, that it gave a $500,000 loan to a Milwaukee area company that was going under. And that state officials tried to get the company even more money, which the owner was going to use to pay for luxury cars he had leased. Democratic lawmakers in recent weeks have called for disbanding the WEDC entirely or for its CEO, Reed Hall, to step down. One of those lawmakers is State Senator Julie Lasa, who joins us now from our Wausau affiliate, WAOW-TV. Senator, it's good to have you on the program. And let me begin with your call that Reed Hall, the current head of this agency, should step down. What do you think that would accomplish?
Well, what we believe it will accomplish is, one, the second scathing audit released by the Nonpartisan Legislative Audit Bureau was during the time period where Reed Hall was the secretary and CEO of WEDC. That audit said that WEDC was not following certain state laws and even some of the board's own procedures. We've also seen under his leadership where WEDC has been very reluctant to release records to board members and be transparent in terms of information. The only time that they provide critical information to the board, it seems like, is right after a scathing Legislative Audit Bureau audit has been released, or there has been an investigative report released by the media that is really damaging to the agency. So
you're not buying the argument that a lot of these problems occurred earlier in the history of this agency, and that Reed Hall has been involved in trying to address and fix some of these problems. You're not buying that?
Well, I do believe that there has been some progress made because the board has put into place much stronger policies than were in the very beginning of the agency. But no, a number of the issues that Representative Barca and I and other legislators are really concerned about have happened under Reed's tenure. So I do think that a number of these issues have occurred under Secretary Hall's leadership, and that's why he really needs to step down.
Senator, let me have you address what some Republicans say, and they say that a lot of this, the calls for Reed Hall's resignation coming from you and Representative Barca, a lot of this is politics, and that in fact some of it may be intended to embarrass the governor who's about to announce his presidential ambitions. How much politics is involved in this, in your opinion?
Well, we're not playing politics with this issue. I think what is important is that taxpayers, the significant amount of resources, the tens of millions of dollars that are invested in this agency every year in order to help create jobs in the state aren't wasted. And with the instance of this $500,000 loan to BCI, Bill Minahan wanted to use it to pay off debts, not to create jobs. And even after WEDC knew that this company was in trouble, was going to have difficulty paying the loans off that they had already received, you had Governor Walker, Secretary of the Department of Administration at that time, Mike Hipsch, coming back for additional millions of dollars in taxpayer money. And I do believe that there needs to be accountability and transparency at WEDC, and that is why Representative Barca and I have called for the Federal Department of Justice to come in and investigate, because we're concerned that laws may have been broken in regards to that loan, as well as potential other issues at the agency.
How much responsibility, you were on the board, so is Representative Barca. How much responsibility do you and other board members share in some of what has occurred within this agency?
Well, Governor Walker is the chairman of the board, and I think ultimately he bears responsibility for the agency, because the CEO, the COO, as well as the CFO do not report to the board of directors. They are hired and fired by the governor. And the fact is that as WEDC's pattern has been from the very beginning, board members are left in the dark. They aren't told about critical facts until there is a scathing audit that's released by the Legislative Audit Bureau, or there is a damning report in the news media about wrongdoing that's going on there. That's the only time the agency comes forward with information to the board. A lot of the times we're reading about it in the newspapers at the same time everybody else is. And that is no way to run a transparent and accountable agency for the millions of dollars that taxpayers are investing in it every year.
Senator, final question, unrelated matter. It now appears that the deal for a new arena in downtown Milwaukee and the prevailing wage issue will be taken up separately outside the budget. On the arena issue, do you think there are any Democratic votes in your caucus, in the Democratic caucus right now, for a new arena in Milwaukee?
Well, as far as I know, no Democrats have been involved from the legislature with a seat at the table in order to negotiate that deal. So I think that given the fact that Republicans are the ones that are putting the deal together with local leaders from Milwaukee County and the city of Milwaukee, that it is incumbent upon the Republicans to be able to find the necessary votes to pass it, because Democrats have not been included in the process. And I think that in order for Democrats to consider voting for that deal, we need to have a place at the table, and so far that has not occurred.
If that happened in the next few days, if you had serious conversations with Republican leadership in the Senate, do you think some Democrats could get on board and get behind the arena deal?
I think Senator Fitzgerald is going to have his hands full trying to get enough votes for that budget that is really detrimental to education in so many of our priorities here in the state of Wisconsin, not to mention the issues that he's going to have with the Bucks Arena with his caucus. So it's hard to say what's going to happen in the upcoming days, but so far, given the Republicans' track record on this, they haven't included Democrats, given us a seat at the table. So it's really hard to anticipate where there would be Democratic votes for this.
Senator Julie Lasso, the Democrat from Stevens Point, we appreciate your time today. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Mike. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Coming up next, two former Commerce secretaries who were part of a group that recommended forming an agency similar to the WEDC. How do they think it's performed, and what do they think it should do differently? That's when Up Front continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company.